This week, two countries united by a common problem, the scourge of sexual violence. We're in India to find out how they're coping with changing a patriarchal society.
जैसे कि आर्मी मैन होते हैं तो उनको मतलब एक वर्दी में एक शक्ति होती है जो कि आप पहनने के बाद खुद ब खुद हमारे शरीर में आ जाती है। तो जब मैं अपनी ड्रेस पहनती हूँ तो उस टाइम ऐसा लगता है कि मैं आर्मी की एक सिपाही हूँ जो कि अपने काम को अंजाम देने के लिए जा रही हूँ।
This is Checkpoint, and I'm EP26. ENCA's parliamentary correspondent Paula Charles recently travelled to India with feminist writers and an NGO on a fact-finding mission to investigate why sexual violence, rape and abuse plague the women of both South Africa and India. She filed this report for Checkpoint.
It may be thousands of kilometers away and a world apart. But South Africa and India share a dark and horrible label. Both have been dubbed the rape capitals of the world. December 16th, 2012, a rape and murder occurred in Delhi that was so shocking, so horrifying, that it made India and the world sit up and wonder at what we had become. While waiting for a bus after a movie that night, a 23-year-old medical student and her male friend were offered a lift on an off-duty charter bus. On board were 5 men and the driver, clearly on a joyride. What followed was a ride to hell and back for the woman, who was gang raped and penetrated with an iron rod. She passed away in a Singapore hospital 2 weeks later, sparking unprecedented outrage. 7 weeks later, with protests still raging in India, South Africa had its own wake-up call. Anine Boysen was raped and left for dead at a construction site near Bredasdorp in February 2013.
For the first time ever, there was tremendous social mobilization. We've not seen that globally ever before. And Anine, in some ways, fit all the criteria which made it comparable to the Delhi case in terms of how brutal it was. It was suddenly in the public domain and a subject of discussion.
Never before had two nations been flung together by two similar acts of violence against women. One NGO wanted answers. The Heinrich Bull Foundation commissioned feminist researcher Joy Watson, an activist Vivian Lalu from South Africa, and renowned author Urvashi Butalia from India to investigate why both countries were home to such brutal attacks.
We had a chance to stop, to pause, to think, and actually to write something where we attempt to begin to understand what happened.
In recent years, rape has become so rife in India that an insurance company even wanted to provide cover against it.
It's complete madness. It's like saying, okay, this is an inevitability, this will happen to you, simply because you're a woman, take out an insurance policy against it. And we had a very highly placed politician, our then Prime Minister, who was from a right-wing fundamentalist party, the same party that's ruling now, who was going to inaugurate this insurance policy. And then feminist groups got wind of it, and we just created such a ruckus. They had to withdraw it.
Many believe that deeply entrenched patriarchy is at the root of the problem, both in South Africa and India. Psychiatrist Achal Bhagat says India's traditionalist culture often means women are treated like children.
Decision-making in Indian homes regarding health decisions, whether a woman should go out and seek health treatment or not, is being made by the man. Buying decisions, parenting decisions, schooling decisions, a large percentage of decision making in the home is still being controlled by the man.
Reema Panchal, whom we met at a women's support group outside of Delhi, was married at 19. Shortly after the wedding, she says, her husband began beating her and demanding more money from her parents for her dowry.
तो मैंने कहा कि मैंने आपसे पहले मना किया था कि मतलब मैं पैसे नहीं दे सकती क्योंकि मेरे पापा जी ने भी शादी में इतने पैसे लगाए हैं, मैं आपको नहीं दे सकती इतने पैसे। तो उन्होंने फिर मेरे साथ मार पिटाई की। मेरी सास थी, उन्होंने मेरी मौसी सास थी, उन्होंने भी मेरे साथ बहुत मार पिटाई की थी। मारते थे, हाथ काटे थे मेरे, और उनमें बिजली का करंट लगाते थे। ऐसी जगह मुझे मारा है जहाँ पे मैं बता भी नहीं सकती।
She says they often locked her up for days without food, and her husband's uncle tried to rape her.
मेरे मतलब नाइट में मेरे रूम में घुस के मेरे साथ ज़बरदस्ती करने की कोशिश की। जब मैंने उनसे अपने हस्बैंड से उनकी शिकायत की तो उन्होंने मुझे फिर भी मारा।
Reema believes she became close to becoming a victim of dowry death. Checkpoint did not speak to her husband to hear his version of events, but dowry deaths aren't uncommon in India. Brides are murdered or even commit suicide to escape abuse. 2 years on, Reema is still fighting for a divorce settlement, and she's taken up the cause for other women.
जो मेरे साथ हो रहा है वो मेरे से अगर कोई लड़की उनकी लाइफ में आए तो उनके साथ वो ऐसा ना करे। मैं ये चाहती हूँ कि जैसे मेरी लाइफ बर्बाद किया है वो दूसरे की लाइफ बर्बाद ना कर सके।
After the break, the role of poverty, inequality and urbanization.
They might want to be economically independent, but taking permission from the husband or the brother or the father is a very difficult task.
You're with Checkpoint, and we return to India to find out what women are doing to make their country safer.
South Africa and India are both rapidly developing nations with gross inequalities between rich and poor. But pervasive sexual violence wasn't always part of India's makeup.
As a girl, sexual violence, rape was not something that we feared that much. I think it's changed over the years. Cities become much more crowded, globalization has changed things, and income levels of the middle class and rich have skyrocketed, the poor have become poorer, crime has gone up. So the sexual violence, I think, is part of that kind of flux that is happening in this society.
India has a long history of institutionalized segregation through class. The caste system has been around for centuries, but people are now becoming more determined to be recognized for who they are, rather than the class into which they were born. Simla Pal lives in a village an hour from Delhi. She found herself paralyzed by her reliance on her husband. So she began working at a sewing club, sponsored by an NGO. Now she sells the clothes she makes.
औरत इसलिए चाहती है कि अपने पैरों पे खड़ा हो सके और किसी से पैसे पति से ना मांगने पड़े, अपने आप ही हम अपने ऊपर भरोसा रहे कि हम कुछ कर सकते हैं हम भी, इसलिए यहाँ सीखने के लिए आते हैं और सीख के फिर कुछ करते हैं.
A lack of safe transport, especially at night, was a big concern of young women I spoke to.
We travel by the metro, which is a really crowded form of public transport, and if we travel, there are two compartments. There's a ladies compartment and a general compartment. So if by chance we get into the general compartment, it's inevitable that we will be groped.
With such a high population in New Delhi, there never seems to be enough buses, trains or taxis. And as you can see on this bus, people are sardined in trying to get around the city. And it's situations like these where women are most vulnerable to either being groped, harassed, and sometimes attacked. But one woman has come up with a solution, a cab service dedicated to women only, to get them around the city safely. Sakar Cabs was started for women by women. This service began 6 years ago. Women are recruited from the slums of Delhi and trained to be drivers. But that's not all they learn.
One big part of our training is about women's empowerment. It's about understanding why there are no women drivers and why is it so important for women to break these kind of glass ceilings. And that also talks about the issues of violence, how to protect themselves from violence, both on the road and also in the homes.
The business now has 80 female drivers and chauffeurs. Chandani is Sakar Cab's very first trained-up driver, but it hasn't been an easy road. She remembers the day she joined a queue to obtain her taxi driver's license.
कमर्शियल लाइसेंस के वालों की लाइन है, तो मैंने कहा हाँ मैं कमर्शियल लाइसेंस लेने के लिए ही आई हूँ, तो मुझे मतलब दोबारा मुझे पलट के जवाब दे रहा है तुम पागल हो गई हो क्या, तुम टैक्सी चलाओगी और लड़कों की कमी हो गई है। मतलब ऐसे बहुत सारे अभी भी हम लोग झेलते हुए आ रहे हैं कि लोगों को ये एक्सेप्ट ही नहीं करना चाहते हैं कि मतलब लड़कियां लड़कों के काम में आए।
Delhi roads are chaotic and full of aggression, but Chandani handles them like a pro.
जैसे कि आर्मी मैन होते हैं तो उनको मतलब एक वर्दी में एक शक्ति होती है जो कि आप पहनने के बाद खुद ब खुद हमारे शरीर में आ जाती है। तो जब मैं अपनी ड्रेस पहनती हूँ तो उस टाइम ऐसा लगता है कि मैं आर्मी की एक सिपाही हूँ जो कि अपने काम को अंजाम देने के लिए जा रही हूँ।
But the greatest challenge in recruiting women drivers is getting permission from the men in their lives.
They might want to be economically independent, but taking permission from the husband or the brother or the father is a very difficult task.
When we return, we catch up with a South African editor in India to find out how his newspaper tackles sexual violence.
What's happened here is that the reporting around rape has been drawn into the heart of the reporting around civic issues generally.
The December 16 gang rape changed the face of Indian society forever. It also galvanized the media into changing the way rape is reported. Back to Paula Charles in Delhi.
Very few rapes are reported in India. In a population of over 1.2 billion people, only 33,000 rapes were reported in the last year. Compare this to South Africa, which has only 50 million people, a 20th of India's population. More than 46,000 rapes were reported in the last year. Experts say insensitive attitudes and corruption in the Indian police are some of the main factors discouraging women from reporting rape. This man says his sister was raped 2 years ago when she was just 12.
वो मदद करना चाहते नहीं थे, वो कह रहे थे कि कुछ यहीं से ले दे, कुछ केस बंद करवा दो यहीं पे। वो मदद करना नहीं चाहते थे बिल्कुल। फिर हमने जोर डालकर फिर हमने केस करवा दी।
Despite his insistence that the rape be reported, he says that's as far as it went.
बार-बार कोर्ट में बुला रहे थे, कोई उसका वो नहीं और कुछ नहीं कर रहे थे ये लोग। बार-बार डेट दे रहे थे, हर बार अगली डेट दे रहे थे। इससे मैं satisfied नहीं था।
The family enlisted the help of a legal NGO, a small team of lawyers that advises minors who've just been raped, as well as their families, on how to access criminal justice.
Our presence has ensured that the time duration between one hearing and the other is getting shorter, and people are aware that there's a lawyer of the victim present here and they're accountable.
The family's case is now moving forward in court, but backlogs and overworked prosecutors continue to hamper justice. India has a very low conviction rate for rape, although on paper, it's markedly better than South Africa's conviction rate, which in 2012 stood at just 7%. In Aneen Boyson's case, this man, Johannes Khanna, received a double life sentence. But most victims never see justice. After Aneen's death, the government pledged to try to make sexual offences courts work for everyone. Vashi Batalia and the team visited one up and running in Cape Town.
I was really amazed to see how everything had been thought through till the last detail. The structure of the courtroom, where the accused sits, where the victim sits. If the victim is a child, she is not made to face the accused. She's in a room elsewhere. There is an attendant with her. And I've never seen anything like that in India. We keep talking about it.
But few of the courts are operational. The National Prosecuting Authority told Parliament last year that it couldn't afford to roll them out countrywide. The December 16th rape and murder case prompted several changes to Indian law. The definition of rape was broadened, harsher penalties were implemented, and even harassment and stalking was included as a criminal offence. But there was one area which activists felt that Parliament fell short, and that was that they refused to recognise marital rape as an offence.
It really shows the deep patriarchal assumption behind that, that if you are in this relationship, then you don't have the rights you otherwise have.
While South Africa recognises rape within marriage, other aspects like a woman's conduct are examined in our courts.
We interrogate history of sexual activity, your character, are you somebody who drinks, and all of that for whatever reason is seen to take away from your right to claim an act of violence. And whereas in India there now is legislation to outlaw that.
Also recently outlawed in India are outdated medical practices used to determine whether a rape survivor is sexually active, like the two-finger test.
In the past, the people tried to look out the size of the introitus or the vagina, so they used to pass two fingers, and if two fingers were easily admitted, so there was a comment put out that the lady is used to an act of sexual intercourse, and if one finger could not pass easily, so that means she is not used to an act of sexual intercourse. So there is no scientific basis for that, but unfortunately this was being carried out in the medical documentation.
But there is still much in India that needs to change.
Is there a better training for police officers to be able to manage victims? No. Is there more focus on protection of witnesses? No. Is there more focus on recovery of the victim in a non-stigmatized manner? No. Does the judicial process still re-traumatize the victim? Yes. So, are there substantive changes? No.
There have, since the December 16th incident, been changes to the way rape is reported in India. Former Mail and Guardian editor Nick Dawes is now chief content editor of the Hindustan Times in Delhi.
Sexual violence receives a lot of attention. Their profile in the news is very high, and questions of how to handle the rights of survivors, I think, are being treated a lot better than they were before that really watershed moment.
On the whole, Dawes says the South African media simply doesn't dig deep enough when reporting on sexual violence.
Most of it is done as a very straight kind of crime reporting thing, you know. In Dobsonville last night, a 23-year-old woman was, you know, raped, and one paragraph and over. What's happened here is that the reporting around rape has been drawn into the heart of the reporting around civic issues generally. So it's also a question about how the city is built, how women move through the city, how do politicians respond. So it's not seen as a crime story, it's seen as a civic story, and perhaps that's the biggest difference.
Researchers say getting a country to understand the causes of sexual violence isn't going to be solved by annual campaigns.
If we have Women's Day, we tick this, you know, there are a list of things that make it easy for us to say we're doing something. But those are not radically transforming anything at all. They become tools that don't really change structural inequity and sites of power.
But being submerged in each other's cultures has given these researchers a new understanding.
It's very important to not only to look outside, but to have the outside look at you. because we are grappling with similar problems, and because some places have found solutions to some things and others haven't, there's a lot you can learn from each other.
While the answers to many complex questions remain elusive, the journey has certainly revealed that women in both South Africa and India are battling with equality issues. Vashi, Joy and Vivian agree that their nations will only begin to curb sexual violence when women are truly free.
That's all from us this week. Please do give us your feedback. Our Twitter handle is @checkpoint_ENCA. Thanks for watching. I'm Nkepile Mabuse.